The xenobiology classroom aboard the Galactic Federation Academy station fell silent as the hologram activated. 23 students from 17 different species sat motionless, their various appendages frozen in positions of shock or disbelief. Professor Tarvik, a tall Nilarian with forearms and translucent skin that flashed warning colors, had just announced the day's practical demonstration. Today, we observe a human completing their field research assignment, Tarvik announced, voice warbling with a mixture of academic detachment and barely suppressed anxiety. The word human sent ripples of unease through the classroom. Everyone knew what humans were. Deathworlders, Category 12 gravity adaptives, endurance predators from a planet so hostile that most civilized species would die within minutes of setting foot on its surface. In the center of the classroom, the hologram showed a tall, broad-shouldered human named Jack. He moved with the casual confidence that all humans seem to possess, unaware or unconcerned that his every movement set off primal alarms in the neurological systems of his observers. The human undergraduate has selected to study the Crimson Night Stalker of Valaxis 7 for his term project, Professor Tarvik continued. He will attempt to gather biometric data on the creature. Gasps echoed through the classroom. One student, a gelatinous frozen, retreated into their protective shell with a soft squishing sound. But Professor, called out Linth, a reptilian Doraxian whose scales had paled to nearly white. Crimson Night Stalkers are apex predators. They're classified as extinction-level threats on 7 worlds. Professor Tarvik's skin pulsed with confirmation patterns. Precisely why the data is valuable. No researcher has ever gotten close enough to gather comprehensive readings. The human volunteered. The hologram shifted to show a purple-tinged forest with massive trees stretching hundreds of meters into the sky. Jack moved quietly through the undergrowth, carrying only a small pack and what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon. Humans rely on primitive technology, whispered Morrow, an insectoid student with compound eyes that reflected the hologram in hundreds of tiny images. Their universities must be barbaric. Actually, corrected Professor Tarvik, the human is from Stanford University, one of their most prestigious institutions. They simply prefer to problem-solve using minimal equipment. The class watched in horrified fascination as Jack moved deeper into the forest, occasionally checking readings on a wrist device. His movements were deliberate, careful, and disturbingly predatory. He's tracking it, realized Orla, a winged Vish whose feathers were bristling with tension. Not waiting for it to appear, actively hunting an apex predator. Correct, said Professor Tarvik. Humans have evolved as pursuit predators. They find it natural. The hologram suddenly shifted perspective as Jack froze, eyes focused on something in the distance. The camera drone zoomed in to reveal a massive creature moving through the trees ahead. The Crimson Night Stalker stood nearly 3 meters tall, its 6 limbs ending in claws the length of daggers. Its skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed hypnotically, a hunting adaptation that paralyzed most prey. A row of sensory spines along its back twitched in constant motion, detecting the slightest changes in air pressure or electromagnetic fields. The human should retreat, whispered Linth. Even our military units engage Night Stalkers only in squadrons of 12 or more. But Jack didn't retreat. He moved closer, circling to approach from downwind. The class watched in disbelief as he prepared what appeared to be sampling equipment from his pack. The assignment requires tissue samples and neural readings, explained Professor Tarvik, which would normally require sedation or post-mortem extraction. Post-mortem, squeaked a small avian student. You mean after it's dead? Yes, replied Tarvik. Though the human seems to have other plans. The class watched as Jack approached to within 20 meters of the creature, close enough to smell its musky scent and hear the clicking of its secondary mandibles. He readied a small device in one hand and then, to the absolute horror of every student watching, deliberately stepped on a branch. The crack echoed through the forest. The Night Stalker whirled, its bioluminescent patterns flaring into a hypnotic swirl of colors that would have immobilized any natural prey. Jack merely squinted against the brightness and continued his approach. "He's immune to the paralytic display," gasped Morrow. "How is that possible?" "Human neurological systems are uniquely resistant to many forms of external manipulation," Tarvik explained. "Their evolution on Earth has exposed them to thousands of toxins and threats." The Night Stalker, realizing its primary defense was ineffective, let out a bone-chilling shriek and charged. 23 alien students cried out in various languages and frequencies as the massive predator bore down on the human. Jack didn't run. Instead, he waited until the last possible moment, then dropped and rolled beneath the creature's slashing claws. In one fluid motion, he sprang up and onto the Night Stalker's back, locking his arms around its neck while attaching the small device to the base of its skull. "He's wrestling it." Orla's voice was barely a whisper. The class watched in stunned silence as Jack and the Night Stalker engaged in a violent struggle. The human was thrown against trees, dragged through undergrowth, and slashed by glancing blows from the creature's claws. Yet he maintained his grip, adjusting the device until it emitted a soft blue glow. "Neural scanner activated," announced Jack through the feed. "Collecting data now. Estimated time to completion, 3 minutes. 3 minutes? Linth was practically hyperventilating. "He needs to stay attached to that monster for 3 minutes? Professor?" Tarvik's skin had gone completely transparent with stress. "That appears to be the case." The Night Stalker thrashed wildly, trying to dislodge the human from its back. Jack simply tightened his grip, occasionally shifting position to avoid the creature's attempts to reach him with its claws. Blood, bright red human blood, stained his clothing from numerous cuts, yet his expression remained focused, almost calm. When the device beeped completion, Jack extracted a small sampling tool and, with surgical precision, collected a tissue sample from the creature's neck. Then, with a powerful push, he launched himself away from the beast and rolled to his feet. The Night Stalker, confused by the sudden release, hesitated just long enough for Jack to put distance between them. It let out a final shriek before disappearing into the forest. Jack calmly packed away his samples, checked his wounds with clinical detachment, and spoke to the recording drone. "Assignment complete. Returning to extraction point." Professor Tarvik deactivated the hologram. The classroom remained silent for a long moment. "And that," the professor finally said, "is why humans are classified as Deathworlders. Any questions?" Every appendage in the room remained still. No one had questions. They were too busy reconsidering everything they thought they knew about the unassuming species called humans.